Devlin, Untamed.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The Platform.
iOS, it's only sport. Martin, Devlin, Lachlan War. That's the name of our show, 1 till 4 on the platform on weekdays. It's also the name of this podcast, iOS, it's only sport. We talk about sport. That's what we do. We talk about it. We think about it. We argue about it. We lament it. We love it. We hate it. We love it. We hate it. We love it. We hate it. We obsess about it. We stress about it. This is the podcast highlights from our show.
We live in an amazing, amazing world, and it's wasted on the crappiest generation of just spoiled idiots.
Did the All Blacks have an injury crisis? Can we survive without several first-choice starters for the World Cup opener against France on Saturday? Are our backups good enough? What is this latest news about Jordie Barrett's knee do to our chances and your mindset when it comes to Saturday versus France and beyond? We're already down Brodie Retallick, Shannon Frizzell and Tyrell Lomax. Two of those three, Retallick and Lomax, definitely won't play versus France. Frizzell, we don't know. And now Jordie Barrett is uncertain as well. Take out those four and we are not the same team. We saw enough evidence of that versus South Africa at Twickenham. Our replacement players are not of the same standard. Not in those positions anyway. Who replaces Frizzell? Is it Jacobson? Does Papali'i come in? Maybe put Scott Barrett back at 6 and Tupou Vai at lock. But again, Vai coming in at lock isn't nearly the same presence Retallick is, nor is he up to Scott Barrett's standard at lock. Frizzell at 6 this year has been a revelation. He's been outstanding. Suddenly, after years of inconsistency, he's turned in exactly the sort of performances that we've all been waiting for since Jerome Kano retired after the 2015 World Cup. Since that time, we've had 16 different players in that position, and none have claimed it as their own. Frizzell, it would now seem, is that guy. As for the midfield, no Jordie Barrett. It's just a maybe at this stage, or maybe it's a definite, but they just don't want to say just yet till they name the team. He goes, though, and who comes in at second 5? Havili, Leicester, or Leonard Brown? Havili hasn't played since he was injured with the Crusaders. He hasn't played for the All Blacks yet this year, so rule him out. There's no way they're going to select him when he hasn't had a game. Leicester Whainganuku is a 13. He's not a 12. If he was selected, he'd be untried in the position and the combination. So it's got to be Leonard Brown. 60-plus tests for the All Blacks and never stamped himself as a world-class player in either midfield position. But this is where we're at, and this is who we've got. And if you're not good enough to win a World Cup for the All Blacks, then what the hell are you doing there anyway? You see, you have a squad so you can cover for injuries in every position and every situation. No, Jordie isn't a crisis, but missing all four of those first-choice players is certainly a real concern. How much of one? Well, I guess against France on Saturday, we are going to learn.
Devlin.
What do you want? We want information. Information. You won't get it.
The Platform.
Comprehensive sports news bulletin, Lachlan. Let me guess you're leading with Kane Williamson.
Well, I guess that is the probably most important
Well,
news.
it's either him or Jordie Barrett, isn't it? It's one of those two. Those are the two big stories, aren't they?
Yeah. Jeez, good.
One's a great news story, coming back from injury. The other, maybe not so.
Black Caps white ball skipper Kane Williamson has been cleared for selection for the upcoming World Cup one-day tournament in India. He's travelled with the national team for the limited overs tour of England to continue his recovery. The coach Gary Stead confirms his fitness has reached a level where he can be included in the 15-man squad. Rugby World Cup hype has been overshadowed by a huge political storm involving a convicted racist, France's head coach and the country's president. As World Rugby looks to promote inclusivity, tournament bosses are standing by their decision to allow a French player to take the field despite his criminal history of racially charged violence. But this player, his name is... remind me his name, Martin? Because my page is not loading.
It's Bastien Chaladou.
There we go. It's halfway down this article. Thick. But yeah, Lock Bastien Chaladou has been called up as an injury replacement despite a 6-month suspended prison sentence for a racially motivated attack on 2 former players in 2020. French politicians want him stripped of his World Cup cap, but as he is currently appealing his conviction, tournament bosses are grinning and bearing it. Now, if you've been convicted, you've been found guilty, right?
Yeah.
So even if you're appealing it, shouldn't it be the opposite of before you're convicted where it's innocent till proven guilty? Shouldn't it be guilty till proven innocent?
Well,
because you've been convicted.
There's no question about what he did. He's just arguing the semantics about was it a racist attack. He attacked 2 black former players, teammates of his, okay? And he was accused at the time of it being a racially motivated attack. Now, of course, he's not. He's saying that it isn't. It was just him being a thug.
Veteran half Sean Johnson has scooped the major awards, or major honours, should I say, at the Warriors end of season awards as they prepare for this weekend's NRL finals. Johnson has won the Simon Mannering Medal as Player of the Year for the first time in his time with the Warriors. He also took out the Players Player of the Year and People's Choice Award. NASCAR-bound Shane Van Gisbergen has walked away unscathed from what his Triple Eight Supercars team has described as a huge crash. The three-time Supercars champion was testing at Queensland Raceway for the upcoming endurance races when he went off the track at turn 6, managed to scupper a little bit of speed, so the impact wasn't as bad as what it probably would have been. Some US Open results, let's head to those. We've got a great game going on right now between Yannick Sinner and Alexander Zverev. They're in the third set. It is 1 apiece. Zverev up 3-2 in that third set. Earlier on, Daniil Medvedev beating Alex de Minaur in 4 sets. Andrei Rublev advancing in 4 sets as well. Carlos Alcaraz top seed, breezing by his Italian opponent in straight sets.
The ATM podcast happens every Tuesday on the platform. That is Mark Watson joins me, Martin Devlin, episode 53 today, talking about a whole lot of stuff. But kicking it off with the All Blacks, Jordie Barrett, is he injured? Who's going to replace him? And also, I don't know about you, but I feel pretty uncomfortable with this whole visiting war graves thing and just the media stories around it and the PR stunt that it was. News that Jordie Barrett may miss it. Mate, we're down now potentially 4 of our first choice players. That's Lomax, Retallick, Frizzell and Jordie Barrett. And I tell you what, my heart sinks because I look at the replacements of those players and think they are not the same as the guy that isn't there. How much does this weaken us and how much of a worry is it?
We need Shannon Frizzell. I think Shannon Frizzell, out of the guys you mentioned, I think is the biggest concern. I think he's been magnificent this year, probably the best player in the All Blacks this season. And it's amazing, isn't it? For so long, we've waited to see what the fascination is around Shannon Frizzell. You know, we're waiting to sort of see the Jerry Collins come out, and we've never quite seen it. And then, like a lot of sports, suddenly you do have that breakthrough season. He is the big one for me. I think we can probably get away with Sam Whitelock and Scott Barrett at lock. And I think we've got some replacement there. Yeah, look, this All Black team, I keep saying it, I just would have had Jack Goodhue in that midfield mix somewhere. I'm not convinced that Anton Leonard-Brown's going to do the job at second 5'8" if Jordie Barrett's out. Look, I can't see us getting up and beating the French this week. I just don't hope it's not a massacre. I hope that, you know, if we lose narrowly and there's some positives to take out of it. On the other side of it, I guess if we were to beat France in this first game, how much pressure does that then be put on the French by the French public, and can they handle that scrutiny? Can they handle that pressure? We've said this in the past. We've said it about Ireland in the past, and Hansen's come out, you know, the weight of expectation, number one side of the world. The All Blacks have always got that on them. They've always had that on them. So I think that's the one advantage that we do have. But I think I said this last week. I just, when it's all said and done, the quarterfinal's the key game, clearly. I just not sure that we are good enough. But look, it's going to be an incredibly, incredibly exciting time over the next 4 to 6 weeks. It always is Rugby World Cup. It always is Olympics time. And then again, you throw the Warriors in the mix, and there's a lot to look forward to, and how people around the country are going to set their weekend up or set their mornings up. Martin, and just on that too, and I know you might bring it up, but I just wanted to touch too on the All Blacks going off and going to these sacred grounds where a lot of New Zealand soldiers are buried during World War One. And you brought up the point that no media were invited along, and that all media was put up on the All Blacks social media channels. I'm
starting to feel uncomfortable about this, mate. I really am. Look, I just think these are sideshow promos. I feel icky about it because I kind of wonder what the purpose of what they're trying to do. Is it really deeply to pay respects? And then, the news media is desperate for a story, and out comes an angle of, Tamaiti Williams discovered that his great-great-great-grandfather had been there, which is, it's awfully sad and it's very poignant and everything else. and then the next day it gets forgotten because there's an injury story. Look, I don't know. It's just made for TV pictures for me, and I just there's something about it that makes me feel really uncomfortable. The somberness of it, the reality of it, the fact that you get the word war attached to a game of rugby, and then the cliches come out about the determined men going overseas for their country. Like that. I mean, it's just all a load of waffly, horrible crap, mate. And men and women died. They got gassed. They got burnt alive. They got buried. They got blown to bits. It's got nothing to do with sport. And every New Zealander that goes to these places, I'm sure, is deeply moved by it. But I just think this is it's a kind of a made-for-sideshow publicity stunt. And I just feel, and I feel even more uncomfortable now that this is only available across the All Blacks' private personal media channels. And eventually, what this is going to lead to, Mark, and this is where I think the dark hole that we're going down, is this is the very start of what NZR Plus is going to do. Eventually, you will not get anything out of the All Blacks at all unless you subscribe to that channel. That's where this is going. This is the very start of it.
Yeah, and hopefully that's been identified in that review of the board and how just out of touch they are. Look, I agree with you completely on this one. The moment you start commercialising anything to do with war veterans and those that have lost their lives in the war, I think it's a big, big black mark. I think it's absolutely appalling. It's disgraceful. I have no problem, and I'm a big believer in it, that I think every New Zealander at some point should go to these, whether it be to Flanders, whether it be to certain parts of France, whether it be to Gallipoli, and actually just go and take some time and just have a moment to reflect and gain the understanding that a lot of these people were 18, 19 or 20 who didn't even know what they were doing. And as you mentioned, the brutal ways in which they died, in which they sacrificed themselves, arguably for some sort of politician's war. And I think it is a timely reminder. And, I think, look, take the All Blacks there and just say, look, this is, the All Blacks. It's not about you. It's so much bigger than that, and do it for all the right reasons. But when I start hearing about social medias and it's exclusive to new commercial channels, then it actually irks me. I find it very distasteful. In fact, I just find it thoroughly appalling, to be perfectly bloody blunt.
The Tide 5, which is 5 separate sporting topics.
The Tide 5.
Topics to talk about. Borisa Simonic, and I hope I pronounced that right, this poor Serbian bloke who has lost a kidney playing at the FIBA World Basketball Champs. Bastien Chalaru, the French racist selected by France, could be playing against the All Blacks this weekend on the same week that World Rugby launches their big World Cup inclusivity promo. Sean Johnson wins all 3 major awards at the Warriors Awards. You happy with that? Kane is in. Well, we've already talked quite a bit about that. Israel Adesanya on Sports Centre last night. What a superstar this guy is. Does New Zealand have any bloody idea at all of how big a deal this guy is in American sport? And the Saudi transfer window open for a couple more days. They've offered £150 million for Mo Salah from Liverpool. Apparently it's going up another $100 million. Lachlan, let's start with Sean Johnson, though, because the Warriors' topic du jour. He won the Simon Mannering Player of the Year. Now, look, I like the fact it's called the Simon Mannering Player of the Year because I love Simon Mannering as a player, but you could call that award by 5 or 6 really good stalwart Warriors players.
Stacey Jones. Shouldn't it be Stacey Jones Player of the Year?
Well,
if you talk about the best players in the history of the Warriors, when you think of the Warriors in their history, not that there's much of a history there, he'd be the first player that comes to mind.
Well, Stacey always comes to mind to me straight away. But Simon is right beside there. Look, there are several players to me that define the club, and him and Simon and Stacey would be 2 of those, no question. Players Player of the Year, People's Choice Award of the Year. He wins all 3. You happy with that?
Yep. I'd be happy if it was one of 3 guys. Sean, Tohu or Adam.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or Chance. I think he could have got...
Yeah, Chance had a very good year. I think those other 3 were a little bit more valuable.
I think that
valuable.
I'm not sure whether Sean would get into every single other side in the comp because every team seems to have pretty good 6th and 7th, don't they? I think that every team takes Adam Fanua-Blake. Every single team takes
I can only think of maybe 4 teams that wouldn't take Sean.
Okay.
Brisbane, Penrith, Melbourne. They wouldn't.
Okay, in that case.
Cronulla wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, look,
South's probably
we're
wouldn't.
arguing about excellence is what we're arguing about. I love award ceremonies because in the end...
Brisbane wouldn't take Adam. We don't need him.
Oh, please.
We don't need him.
You'd swap him for Payne because I'll tell you why, because he brings solidity to the club. He brings loyalty to the club, mate.
Stop it.
He's a good man to have around the club.
You're purposely trying to niggle me. It's not going to work today.
Who replaces Jordie Barrett?
Well, they will slot Anton Leonard-Brown into second five.
And straight away I go,
And I think they'll put Lester Whanganuku on the bench.
yeah. I was
Just for a
we'll
bit of
talk
impact.
at length about this in
I hope
a
so.
little while because I just think he defined, to me, if you look up the word average in the Oxford Dictionary, it says Anton Leonard-Brown.
He's
That's
not
what it says,
okay.
mate.
He's not average. He's good, but he's not a game breaker. He's not the guy that when you see him on the team sheet, you go, "Oh, thank goodness
He's played
playing."
60 tests for the All Blacks, mate.
Yeah, but he hasn't been. I mean,
Tell me one that he's been outstanding.
Hold up. To be fair, you can't be average if you get into the All Blacks. And in this situation, you've got to have a fair bit of faith.
I expect you to be
let me
above
finish.
average,
Let me finish. You've got to have a fair bit of faith that when he made his debut under Steve Hansen and when he's been continually selected by Ian Foster, he is good. The thing is,
Show it then.
I, like you, think he's been underwhelming for a number of years when the 12 jumper or 13 jumper, because they kept on changing around which one you're in, that was yours.
Yeah.
Take advantage.
Do it.
He had a couple of good
Make
games
it.
against the Wallabies.
Yeah.
For his first 2 or 3 years, I thought he was always a pretty damn solid player against anyone we played.
I think we're winning a World Cup with him.
But I would like to. I'd actually like to see. I'll tell you what I'd like to see. I'd like to see David Havili play at second five and Lester play at centre. I'd like to see. They won't do that. I'd like to see that.
Chris Jones was telling us about this guy yesterday.
They brought in a guy called Bastien Chevreau, who was convicted of what it was called a racist attack and given a 6-month suspended sentence in 2020. There's now a huge row about him being in the squad. So the French are not coming to this the way they would have wanted.
No, the World Cup big promo in front of the world today, and the World Rugby are there, and all the donutters are there, and the freebies are there, and it's all about inclusivity. Ruby Tui's the face of it all, and then they've got this guy, okay, who's been convicted of a racial attack on 2 other players. He's got a 6-month suspended sentence. Now, added to this, the French president was sitting at a table at this launch next to Gaultier, the coach of France. The microphone was left on, and apparently he said something like, "Get him up there and make him cry if you have to. Get him to cry if you have to." So what happens? Old Bastien does a press conference about 2 hours later and blubs, "I'm not a racist, I'm not this, I'm not that." Should he be in the French side? It's an embarrassment for World Rugby. He's been convicted.
Yeah, and it's a suspended sentence, so it just means that he's not serving it yet.
That's
right?
it.
Well, you're a convicted criminal then, aren't you?
It's a poor look, isn't it?
It's a very poor look. But they said something. I saw some quotes about it that I think it was Alan Gilpin, who's the CEO or the chairman of World Rugby, or one of the two. He said that there's still something on the lines of there's still a level of innocence based on the sentence. So we've got to respect the judicial process.
What
So I
does that
thought,
mean?
well, essentially, because he's not in prison, they still say that. Well, what I don't get is that, well, he's a convicted criminal. He's just not in prison yet.
Yes,
For whatever reason,
yeah.
it's a suspended sentence.
He's just saying it was an assault. It's not a racially motivated assault.
Yeah, so...
Oh, that's
but
good.
he's still convicted.
Oh, that's great, isn't it? Yeah, that's nice. And
So
also,
he's a criminal.
I go back to Thierry Dusatoir. Remember him?
Oh, yeah. Best player in the World Cup final in 2011.
Was he what? He says he shouldn't be in the team.
No, okay.
Okay, in that case, he shouldn't be in the team. Shouldn't be in the team. Simonich, injured versus South Sudan. Some South Sudanese player in group stage at the FIBA World Cup goes up for a layup or something. He goes up with him. The guy elbows him. He's now lost a kidney as a result of that, playing basketball. So he goes to hospital in the Philippines. Apparently complications with the first op. They had to do a second op.
Of course. And a hospital in the Philippines mucking up an operation.
Plenty of people go to the Philippines and they pay for all kinds of plastic surgery. I was actually listening to somebody
There's a difference between plastic surgery and a kidney operation.
Well, people go there, they get dentistry done, they get all kinds of... I was listening to a guy the other day who had a hip replacement. It's worked.
So I don't mean to be at all offensive to Asian countries, but if I was in the Philippines and I need to get a replacement kidney, I'm flying home and getting it done in New Zealand.
You know, I hope you got good travel insurance. When I read this story, I was just horrified. You don't go onto a basketball court and expect to wake up in hospital minus a kidney, do you? I mean, out of all the full contact sports in the world, what has to happen for that to happen?
It's got to be a really well-positioned elbow to the side that hits so hard.
Yeah.
But also, he probably would have been fine if there was no issues with the first operation.
Yeah.
So that's more so the fault of the doctors than the player who actually elbowed him, I would think.
Couple of games tonight, then Lithuania plays Serbia, and then you've got Italy versus the USA. Who wins those games? Quarterfinals, FIBA World Basketball Champs.
Sorry, read the teams out again.
Lithuania versus Serbia, first game up. That's 8:45 tonight.
Lithuania.
And then at 12:40 a.m. tomorrow morning, Italy versus the USA. I'm hoping for the upset.
No, I'd see the USA win.
Huh?
Because there's a whole lot of NBA players.
Oh, okay. I love to see them get a slap.
But it's like me with Novak Djokovic. They're kind of the enemy, but also they're so good and they're so talented. They are the best player by player. You should be sweeping you should be dicking everyone.
Pick their A team, it should be right, mate.
I'll go Lithuania and USA to win those games.
One New Zealand CEO, long-time Warriors fan, and certainly made a name for himself way back in the Magic round, Jason Paris. Remember the hot water that he got in? Twitter comments about the referees, the big kerfuffle and hoo-ha that erupted. Well, as we approach finals week and away to Penrith, thought it was a good time to revisit and catch up with Jason Paris. I'm going to track you back to May the 5th. You remember that day?
Yes.
You made some comments on Twitter. At that stage, we were 6-5. We'd just lost to Penrith. From that point, we went on an 11-3 run.
Yes.
Do you think anything changed at that time? I mean, has there still been a subconscious bias against the Warriors, or is it when your team's winning, things tend to go your way? What are your observations since that time in terms of the refereeing?
Well, the first observation is my wife's confiscated my phone during all Warriors matches from that point onwards. So that's first observation. Second observation is that was the weekend I bought my flights to the grand final. And all we were looking for is, for some kind of consistency. And I think, to be honest, it's nothing to do with my comments. It's all to do with the momentum that this team has created themselves. I think your observation is right, that winning teams get momentum in all sorts of ways in this competition. And I think that's what the team have earned. So, this 11-3 track record, I think it definitely helps with them with momentum on the field as well.
Hey, looking back now, what are your thoughts on it? I mean, that if Jason Paris speaks about the Warriors, that that there are going to be news media organisations looking at it, and they're going to want to create a clickbait headline and everything else. How do you feel about it now? Do you regret doing it? Do you think, hell, it was just something I did at the time? What are your thoughts?
I think one of the things, the downsides of me is that I don't think of myself as the CEO of One New Zealand. I think of myself as JP from Southland. This bogan that used to play South League on Sundays, and I keep on forgetting sometimes that when you say stuff, it can create a headline. So something I need to keep on reflecting on, and my wife keeps on reminding me of. But look, at the end of the day, I think it did create some conversation and some support for the team from all sorts of different clubs and areas that has helped grow the fan base at the end of the day. But a lot of us have regrets with what we've seen on social media at certain points in time, don't we?
I'm looking in the mirror. That's all I'm looking in the mirror. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the rabbit hole on these kind of things, I mean, sometimes I like it. I dip my toe in, and I think, and then other times I get so frustrated at it. But I found it amusing that there was the sidebar. Oh no, this is a conspiracy theory that Jason Paris had planned this, that he was using this to do an advertising campaign effectively for the switch from Vodafone to One New Zealand. My goodness, there's a lot of dots that got to be connected to do that. When you see those kind of stories, how do you react to those, mate?
I'm not that smart, matey.
You're a very smart man. We all know that. I'm
just a passionate fan. My mates would tell you that. But no, I'm not smart enough. No, like all this is a passionate supporter of the team and the heat of the moment. And look, what I think though is, like, I do have to compliment the NRL. Look, I think what they're doing with this game is just incredible. Like, I know you've been pretty vocal in terms of the differences between rugby and league. I think that goes right through. It goes from the differences at
the leadership at the exec, the rules, right through the game. And I just think the NRL are absolutely humming at the moment. I think it's just never been packaged up better. The commentators, the rule changes that they make, what a fantastic spectacle league is at the moment. So, I can't say enough positive things about what the NRL are doing for this game at the moment, and just super excited to be a part of the final series at the same time.
Jason, they were banning around words like defamation. Did you actually get in any official trouble over this, or is it all sorted?
No, like the NRL, it's all sorted. The NRL, clearly need to defend their refs, and I acknowledge that. And one of the first things I said, was apologise for the use of my unfortunate wording. And so, no, we had a conversation. I agreed that my intention behind the language wasn't how it came across, and put out that apology, and we've kind of moved on. They know we're great supporters of the game. I think we're the longest standing sponsor in NRL's history. We've stuck with the Warriors through thick and thin, as all of the fans have. And so, we've moved on, and the NRL are supportive of the Warriors, supportive of our sponsorship. So, I think a lot of the headlines around the sponsorship being stopped or other stuff happening was just all about headlines and keeping the story going. We kind of moved on pretty quickly after my apology, and we moved on.
To hear the full interview, download the platform at the App Store. Via Platform Plus, you can go back and listen to the whole show and all of the interviews in full. Dean Lonergan, boxing promoter extraordinaire, about to join us. He's a professional leaguey, former Kiwi, played in both hemispheres, but with an expert eye on Israel Adesanya. I saw Izzy on ESPN yesterday. 3 or 4 minute interview it was on the greatest, biggest, most popular sports channel in the world. The All Blacks get nowhere near this. The Rugby World Cup doesn't get a mention, but Israel Adesanya in UFC 293 gets a 4 minute interview. How much is that worth? How big a superstar is this guy? I'll let Dean explain. I was watching ESPN Sports Centre yesterday. I'm a devotee of this program. I love it. I think it's the best sports show on telly. I love Kornheiser and Wilbon. I love that show as well. I love Scott Van Pelt, all of these dudes. Israel Adesanya, they brought on for an interview. 3 or 4 minutes it was. Ahead of UFC 293. He's playing, sorry, when I say playing, he's fighting Sean Strickland. There's nothing playtime about it, is it? But I was watching this yesterday, Dino, and I was just thinking, wow, how big a star is this guy? Now, I know that ESPN owns UFC. They did the deal with Dana White and all of that. So obviously they're self-promoting. I do get that. But, I've never seen the All Blacks. The Rugby World Cup is about to start. Now, the Rugby World Cup is going to the United States in 2031, and we keep getting told about it's the growth explosion sport in the States. It's going to take over. It's going to usurp college football and all this. Not a single word or breath at all about that World Championship. And yet this UFC 293, Israel Adesanya, has 3 or 4 minutes airtime. How big a deal is that? This guy is an absolute superstar, and I'm not sure people in New Zealand get it.
Well, he's probably one of the biggest stars of world sport, full stop, because he's the number one guy in the UFC. The UFC is now, it's a global competition. Dana White's done an incredible job of monetizing this and also spreading it around the globe. And I would guess it goes into upwards of maybe 100 countries around the world from a broadcast point of view. I think Israel is 10 times the star globally that any All Black ever has been, and I include Jonah in that too, because Jonah never would have made the impact in America and a lot of the European countries where Adesanya is going to be a rock star. So, mate, he's absolutely massive. The only guy, in my opinion, who would come close to Israel Adesanya from a Kiwi heritage would be maybe Steven Adams. But even then, Steven's not the number one player in the NBA like Israel Adesanya is in the UFC. So, I'm told Israel, every time he fights, makes between 15 and 20 million US dollars per fight. And that just says he's the number one guy on the planet in terms of combat sports for, MMA. The Tyson Furies of this world and the Anthony Joshuas are probably the only ones who make more than Israel. But, mate, he's a very, very, very big star.
That's a free ad yesterday. It's a free ad for the UFC. It's a free ad for Adesanya. How much is that appearance worth? If that was you and you got one of your fighters on there, 3 or 4 minutes live on ESPN, what is that worth to you?
The answer is I don't know, because at the end of the day, it comes down to what does it equate to in pay-per-view. And the biggest thing is, what do you do? How does it help the UFC sell tickets, sell sponsorship, sell pay-per-views, and sell everything else that they merchandise that they do? And it's all part of a big package. But one appearance doesn't cut the mustard. 20 or 30 appearances does, and that's the sort of frequency Israel would have been on the last sort of 4 or 5 years. So one-off appearance, nobly valuable. Ongoing appearances, yes, I'm a superstar, because ESPN is probably distributed to 100 countries as well.
And, when you try and put some perspective on it, like rugby just doesn't cut it in the United States. And, obviously it'll get some attention when it's actually been held there. But a Rugby World Cup, I just go back to a quote that Israel Adesanya said, it was a couple of years ago, and he got absolutely pilloried in this country. He said, I'm bigger than the All Blacks. And at the time, I understood what he was saying. In where his environment is, he is bigger. And that's what it said to me yesterday. The All Blacks are playing a World Cup. We don't get on ESPN, the biggest sports network in the world, and yet he does. It's not saying, hey, I'm bigger than the All Blacks or a boast or something, but if you can get your head around it and understand commercially, this is where the All Blacks need to be, isn't it? If this is what the Silver Lake deal is all about, this is the market they got to crack. They got to somehow get through that gatekeeper.
Here's what I would say, is that if you took Israel Adesanya's, what he generates as part of the UFC, from a dollar perspective, he probably does. And don't forget, he generates everything in US dollars. The New Zealand Rugby Union get, $100 million New Zealand for their TV rights deal over here. Mate, that wouldn't make up 1, maybe 2 UFC events. Seriously. That is one big behemoth of an organisation. So when he made the statement, he is bigger than the All Blacks, he is bigger than the All Blacks from a publicity point of view. He's bigger than any one single individual of the All Blacks, and he's probably bigger than the brand as a whole. And the way you could find that out is there's a guy on the board of the NZRU as part of the Silver Lake deal who also is on the board of Endeavour, who own the UFC and WWE. And he would be the perfect person for you to interview, Martin, to find out about this. And my gut feel is no one in New Zealand sport knows about this guy, and I've just given you a big tip to give you an insight into what goes on in the real mechanics of real sport, because it's always in professional sport about one thing, and that is the dollars.
To hear the full interview, download the platform at the App Store. Via Platform Plus, you can go back and listen to the whole show and all of the interviews in full. The NPC is a great competition, and it is well worth saving. Now, we've spoken with 4 separate NPC coaches over the last fortnight. Neil Barnes from Taranaki, Tamati Allison from Wellington, John Leslie from Northland, Greg Cornelius, the co-coach of Tasman. Each of them giving great reasons why the NPC is important to New Zealand, why the competition is well worth saving, the good things that it offers and brings, alongside ideas of how to resurrect and rebuild what once used to be the pride of New Zealand rugby. Not fit for purpose, or simply the victim of serious mismanagement. I want to take you back to some of the things that these guys have been saying to us during the first 2 weeks of the competition. Neil Barnes, first up.
We've got a great competition that sits in between club level and professional rugby that develops people. And I could go on and on about people that have never made age group sides or been in New Zealand 20s.
Brady Retallick. Brady Retallick's one of them, mate.
Well, that's going back a bit. I can give you heaps more since then, but these people pop up in club rugby, and since I've come back, like if I just use Daniel Rona, for example, my first year back, pouring concrete, he didn't even hardly got a game for us in the first year, and then he's playing for us last year, gets an injury replacement gig with the Chiefs, and now has a contract. That's what the competition is there for. But unfortunately, we have a whole system now where people are supposed to be identified as they come out of the womb, go into academy, and they walk into your environment like they're entitled to selection and positions all the time. Well, to me, the whole thing would be better run if they come through the club situation, earn their stripes, get an NPC contract. They have to have a job as well, so there's your professional development. You learn to work and put some work boots on and do a friggin' 40 or 50-hour week. And then when you get a professional contract, you've got some form of work ethic, and when you come out of rugby, you've got something to go back to.
I mean, does that just sound like great, basic, common sense? Gray Cornelius from Tasman.
I love the NPC and I love the ethos of it and the tribalism involved with it. So I'm a big fan of it, but of course I'm biased, right? It's great competition, and I can only speak from my perspective and from what I see and what I hear from the players that are in our union and stuff. I mean, the boys love coming back and playing for Tassie and playing in this competition. So, I mean, long may it continue, and I understand that there's obviously a lot more to it than just one man's opinion. There's a lot of financial considerations and stuff that obviously I'm pretty...
Above your pay grade, mate.
Yeah, exactly. So, no, I just enjoy it for what it is. Good fun.
But it does have a future. You're absolutely firm on that.
I hope so. Yeah.
Well, of course, he's going to say that because he's getting paid, it's his job. But, these guys, when you listen to them, just listen to the tone of the voice here and what they're saying. Listen to these guys. Give them the time that they need. Because their answers here, they do have ideas. John Leslie, former Otago man, now coach of Northland. He's talking about just how to bring some crowds back.
If you didn't have the TV or the live games on TV like it was in the amateur era, I can remember playing in the 90s, and most teams would play on Saturdays, and then you'd have a 5 to 6 o'clock slot on the TV, which they'd highlight all the games. The crowds would come to that. The families would be there. I know that's just not the case anymore because of the TV revenue and the TV rights, and people want to sit at home at 7 o'clock and watch the games. That would be a way to get the crowds back and get that immediate buzz on the field and that connection with the community. Probably loosen up with regards to security and that stuff as well, just with regards to kids on the field and those other things that connect the players.
They've talked about fan engagement. That was one of the big messages that came through in the independent review. Just simply that that there is a lost contact between those who support the game, those who love the game, and those who administer the game. Again, these guys, forget that they've got an agenda. Their agenda is saving New Zealand rugby and saving our domestic competition. So, yeah, there is no politics involved in this. It's just simply good men with good ideas. John Leslie, again, and this time just talking about some of the simple things that seem to have been lost.
One of the best feelings was after a big match and a crowd and being on the field afterwards and having all the kids run on and pat you on the back and get an autograph. That was such a nice feeling as a player. And if the ground staff could kind of relax a bit and realise that the grass is not going to get chewing up, and the security people or whoever makes the rules realise that it's very unlikely that a rugby player is going to get assaulted by a kid on the field or something like that. I think that would be fun.
And finally, before we talk about this, make some comment about the comments that have been made. Tamati Ellison, a Wellington coach, talking about his own journey coming up through the clubs.
I was fortunate enough to come through playing club rugby for North as a pathway to going into the Lions. I didn't make rugby through the younger grades, so again, probably a full romantic in that sense. Love club footy and the community aspect, and then I love when 3 or 4 players from each club represent the area, at the Lions level. And as I said, I still think that model exists. We just have to continue to be fresh and fast and flexible with how we connect with our fan base.
The encouraging thing that I get from listening to these guys as well, people, is just simply that it isn't dead, it isn't lost. It's just that those who are in charge don't have a bloody clue of what is in front of them. Tamati Ellison again. And he's talking about the smaller grounds. Now, we've seen this. I've watched Wellington play Shield Challenges this year already out at the Hutt Rec. We saw Rangiora with Canterbury versus Taranaki on the weekend. That worked well. We saw an FPC semi-final. I don't know what ground it was in Christchurch, but again, a really small ground, small crowd, and this is where you start.
Getting that close to the sideline. I remember watching, Tali Lilos, who was the North's captain at the time, Jerry Collins as not much older than me, but as a young man, and sitting on the sidelines at North's and being that close and seeing those guys you looked up to, within an arm's reach. So I think that model is definitely something we can reconnect with, for sure.
Minister of Common Sense needs to get involved.
Next!
Quite obviously.
We need to talk.
We do we?
Need to talk.
All right, well, let me
Next!
talk. Is it worth saving this competition, Lachlan?
Yes.
Is it worth saving, Lachlan, this competition?
Next!
Is it that complicated to save it?
I don't think so. It takes a little bit of innovation. It probably takes a little bit of money loss for the short term. But if you've actually got some good heads gathered around a table, which is, geez, a hard ask for New Zealand rugby.
It is.
I mean, if you there's surely got to be some great rugby brains in this country that have helped make some form of rugby successful in New Zealand over the last 20, 30 years. Get some of them together. Get some people who have formed, I don't know, talk to people in the US about how they made red zone work. Talk to people in the NRL. How do you make the competition survive? How have you made it work?
Talk to the Warriors.
Yes!
But
Why the fans come back?
The NRL is a bit different because that's more of a Super Rugby thing. But talk to the reserve grades. Why do you have fans turning up to watch the Newton Jets who no one cares about, aside from their own fans?
When you sit there and you think that New Zealand rugby, this is our national game. Let's not ever forget that. How difficult is it to remove the ego side of it and actually just get... we've just played 4 coaches there. None of them are hysterical. Yeah, they're all speaking calmly, rationally. Those are small cuts from interviews that we've done. There's plenty more stuff where that came from. Why is this so difficult to achieve?
Because they all are directly involved at the grassroots level, and those who make the decisions at NZR are not. They do not have a clue what goes on at that level.
So the independent review recommends the destruction of the provinces and the influence that the provincial unions have on New Zealand rugby, and a new board which ticks every single rainbow KPI box in the place. Is it possible in New Zealand to just pull the handbrake up, pump the brakes just a little, and actually say, the only thing that's important here is to save our national game. The only thing that's important is to preserve and foster our national game, which is meant to be the kaupapa, actually, of New Zealand rugby. That's their point of being, right? So to do that, it doesn't matter whether you are man or woman. You don't need 40% representation on any committee or any gathering here. You don't need somebody that has to have a rainbow tick beside their name. You don't need any of this. What you need is people who care, who have great ideas, who want to get things done. Is it possible for New Zealand, and the way New Zealand rugby is run at the moment?
No. I know what you're going to ask, and no.
See, this is the quagmire, ladies and gentlemen. This, to me, is where this is the basis of the problem, is that no one is actually prepared to stand up and say, I don't care what colour you are, what sex you are, who you sleep with, or whatever. The only thing that's important is that this game continues. How do we get that to happen? But this is where it is broken down, and it will never, ever get to that stage. Well, there is no way the current administration is going to ever stand up and say that.
No, and one of the problems is that if the people who conduct the review say that actually what's going to save provincial rugby is to minimise the influence, which is minimal as it is, reduce it even further, of those provincial unions on New Zealand rugby and how it's run, well, that means you're taking power away from the people who actually know how to fix and run that part of the game, and you're giving that power to a bunch of people who sit in an office in Auckland and Wellington, who, look, I don't like to call myself, I'm a city boy. I wouldn't know a thing about running rural rugby, and if I was ever in a position of leadership in New Zealand rugby, I'd hand that off to someone who lives in those rural parts and knows how it operates, knows how the clubs and the unions operate.
That's our podcast for today. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to listen to the entire show, 1 till 4, Monday to Friday, download the Platform app, and via Platform Plus, you can go back and listen to whatever shows over however many weeks at your leisure, at your listening pleasure. Platform Plus. First thing to do, though, is download the Platform app.
Devlin.
Unbelievable! Incredible!
The Platform.